Patty Smith. I do programming here, so if I haven't met you, hello. We're so happy to have Bob Lobel here today. He is a Midwesterner by birth, came to New England after starting his career in Burlington, Vermont at WVNY, where they took a chance on a kid with no previous experience or education in broadcasting. And I'd say they kind of took a good calculated risk, because clearly he's done just fine. He's one of the most legendary sports announcers with a career lasting over 30 plus years. And I have had the personal pleasure of playing golf with Bob. We've shared a lot of stories and laughs, which is why I thought it'd be really fun for him to come in. But the one thing that's missing in our golf game, I think, is the panic button that I've heard about. And I'm thinking some of my shots might have warranted. I don't want to give him any ideas, but without further ado, Bob Lobel.
Well, needless to say, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be anywhere, actually. I always feel that when you get in front of a group, first of all, that job in Vermont that you talked about, they took a chance for $8,000 a year. That's what the chance they took. So I'm just saying, at the time, it seemed like a bargain for me. But it was just something I always felt I wanted to do. Actually, it was in Burlington, Vermont, at the University of Vermont, getting a master's degree in education because I wanted to be, first of all, a high school football coach. I could have been vice president if I was a high school football president. But I'm not going to talk about politics. I hope you don't mind. Probably not going to bring up politics, so let's just not worry about that, okay, right off the top. But anyway, I wanted to be a high school football coach, and then I wanted to be a counselor, and then like a college administrator, so I got a master's degree in education at UVM. And then I just thought I always wanted to be like a sportscaster as a hobby. And it just kind of drifted from a hobby toward a career. And it was all by accident. And I can just tell you that sometimes you have to take forks in the road. And I had a couple of them. It was like Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. But the forks in the road I had was in Manchester. Then I moved from Burlington, Vermont, when I was at this station, to Manchester, New Hampshire, at a larger radio station with an opportunity to do play-by-play and all the things I fantasized about growing up as a kid. Forget the college education, forget everything I studied, forget the master's degree, forget all that stuff. So there was a guy in Manchester, New Hampshire named Doug McKenzie. He had an auto dealership, McKenzie Motors, and he offered me a job as his sales manager. Okay, and I've known him for about 4 or 5 years, and we ran the marathon together. One time I ran the Boston Marathon. That's another story. The same day finish, by the way. So Doug offered me this job as a sales manager, and that same week, somebody from WBZ Radio offered me a job to do afternoon sports on BZ Radio. So I told Doug, I said, you know, I'd really like to do this. It means I get a free car. I probably could play golf all the time. But I really have to try to do the BZ Radio thing because I've always been a listener to, you know, Larry Glick and Guy Manella and all Jerry Williams and all those people that were so good. And so I went down to BZ, and that was a fork in the road that I ended up taking. It was purely accidental. And I think the whole career is accidental. And I want to say this, I mean, I'm going to be a name dropper. And I apologize for that. I hate name dropping, but I can't help it because all the people that I've ended up talking about, which some you've seen up behind me, they're names to be dropped. And if I'm going to talk about what I did for a living, it's about with all those people, so I have to mention their names. So I'm not name dropping, I'm just telling you. Like Orr, for instance, or Ted Williams, or Larry Bird. It's like this happened to somebody else. It never happened to me. I was like an observer. But this career, it was like somebody else was sitting there with Larry Bird, Bobby Orr, and Ted Williams. And I think about that. And by the way, that was a show we did one Sunday night. People ask me about it all the time. I have never watched the show, by the way. Never seen it. I know what the show is about. I was there. And there's only one person that could have screwed that show up, and it was me. And I knew that going in, and afterwards I've never watched it. There's no sense watching it, because if you're like me, if you watch yourself, you're always going to be self-critical. Why didn't I ask that question? Why shouldn't I say that? Why did I not ask Larry that question? Or why didn't I ask Gore that question? Because that's just what I do. I don't sit there thinking about, oh, what a great question, Bob, nice job. It doesn't work that way. It's just so great. It stands alone. I don't want to just tell me how much you like the show and then we'll move on. But that was one of the things that I guess everybody thought was a highlight, but to me it was another Sunday night show. And I mean, it was great. It was amazing the way it came together. First, and I'll tell you how that show came together, actually. Feel free to interrupt me with any questions. Believe me, what I'm saying is not that interesting. I've heard it before, and I can promise. So if you have any questions, don't feel free to interrupt. It's perfectly okay, or attack, or whatever you want to do. I'm used to it. The show originally was scheduled for Orr and Bird, the two heroes in the Boston Garden, the two legends in the Boston Garden, two Mount Rushmore people. And in the week before, Ted Williams' son, who was a frequent visitor to our sports office, his name was John Henry Williams, a frequent visitor to our sports office. Why? Because John Henry was kind of hitting on one of our interns. And so he'd be a frequent visitor to our sports office. So he came in and we'd sit and talk, and he said, Bob, I see you're having a big night next weekend with Orr and Bird, and would you like to have Dad sit in on with you? It took me about 2 seconds to say yes. And he said, well, let me check, and sure enough, that's the way it happened. He called, and the morning of the show, actually, Sunday morning, he called me and said, Dad wasn't feeling well. I said, don't tell me that. I don't want to hear it, so just make sure he gets there. So that's how it all happened. The kid comes in, these things, it's kind of bizarre the way that something like this can come together, all the planning in the world. And we had this thing, how many people should we tell? Should we promote the show? Because if we promoted the show, we need to have people to watch. Or if we didn't promote the show, then there's no reason people would watch. If we did promote the show, there'll be hundreds of people standing outside the station looking for autographs. So we had to figure out a way to sneak them in and sneak them out. And it was just kind of a lot of intrigue. And all I'm worried about is sitting down for these guys for an hour and ask questions. All I care. So it worked out. It just worked out. So unlike my marriage to Susan Warnick, actually, you remember Susan, right? Yeah, very well. Well, she and I were very close friends. But together, Susan and I have been married 8 times. 8 is a lot. 2 of us. We added them up. She's got 5. I've only got 3. Well, I kept it simple because I had 3 different Susans. She went with 5 different names, so that's her problem. But she and I are still very close, and we joke about it and everything else. I'm joined now by my partner, and she's really my caregiver, Dee Dee O'Brien. She was probably saved my life 100 times. She was a director of Ironstone Farm, which is a equine rehab center in Andover, near Lowell, right, honey? Yeah, right. Ironstone Farm. So anyway, that's it. Then I had the great fortune of working with Jack Williams and Liz Walker and Joyce Kilhaywick and Bruce Schwegler. They all were great. They all had different personalities, but we all were extremely close. We were just friends, and we always kind of looked out for each other. There was no real animosity or anything else, although Joyce sometimes took too much time talking about theaters that were closing. I said, one night I remember, because every time she took, it ate into the sports time. So she talked about this theater in Cambridge that was closing, and she took 2 minutes to talk about it. The minutes are precious. Seconds are precious. And we had about 4 minutes at 11 o'clock, okay? She took 2 minutes to talk about this theater that's closing in Cambridge. And I said, Joyce, if anybody gave a shit, it wouldn't be closing. So I didn't say that on the air. Some things you can say on the air now that you couldn't say then, but most of us were able to avoid that. But Liz was great. Liz is, she and I, you have friends that you don't talk to for 6 months or a long time, and then you can just pick up the phone and it was like yesterday. And you haven't missed any time at all. She's like that with me. She's in my phone under Jesus. I can't make this up. I have my cell phone's here. When Jesus calls, I answer. And she knows it, and that's, we joke about it, but she went on to be a minister and did all those great things. And her son went on to play in Hamilton. You know that. He was a star. He was Aaron Burr in the play in Hamilton on Broadway. And he was a big-time theater guy. He still is great. So those are the people I worked with, and Jack was like a talk show host. Well, he was like a game show host. He should have been like Ted Knight. He should have been, hey man, he could do all the accents, the Ted Knight accents, and he loved doing it, and we loved Jack. I remember when Liz first told me, when she was pregnant, I remember when she first told me, we were at Jordan Marsh, in the basement of Jordan Marsh on downtown Crossing. If it was there, I'm not sure it's still there. But the reality was, we were downstairs in the basement doing some kind of video thing, and she said, Bobby, I have to tell you something. Yeah? She said, I'm pregnant. Yeah. Wow. Because she was single and black and in Boston, and at that time, it was tough on her. She had a really difficult time adjusting and relating and doing the community thing. And then when I said, what do you think Jack's going to say, Liz? That was my first question to her. Of course, everybody then thought that I was the father. I swear, I went through this whole thing that everybody thought I was the father of the child. And 3 people knew I wasn't, the father, Liz, and me. And everybody else had their own opinion. But she and I had, a lot of fun talking about that, and we just had a great relationship. We always did. We were like brother and sister. And I really missed her. I really missed them. I really missed doing the sports and talking about all these guys that are, here today. It's different today. I'm not sure I would watch. Well, I know I don't watch. I got a phone and I get all my information on the stupid phone. And I don't like it, but I can't help it. I find out, I know what the scores are and I know what the highlights are before they get on television. That's not the way it was. It was before the phones and before the computers, before anybody had a chance to see the highlights, they'd have to tune into the 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock news to see it. So we had an advantage there that they don't have today. Today they have to just really come up with something really unique to get them to watch. I mean, I'm not knocking them. I'm not saying it was better then than now, but it was different. It was a golden era for all of us. Local television is not the same. It doesn't mean that people are any less talented or less interesting or less intelligent in any way, shape, or form. They're not. They're every bit as good, even better. But it's the delivery, the information that the public wants. And my habits have totally changed as a watcher as opposed to a presenter. But I do miss it. I do really miss, it's like everything else in life. You really wish you'd paid a little closer attention to the times that you really enjoyed doing what you did until, why do you wait after you're done doing it to look back and say, that was so much fun, I wish I was back there. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions. If there were a couple guys that I would put on that list with Orr and Bird and Ted Williams today, it would be Brady and Bill Russell. We didn't ask Bill Russell because at that time he was not very Boston friendly. And he went through a tough time when in relating to Boston. So I would have had him on in a second, but we were lucky to get the 3 that we did, as I explained about Ted. But I would add Brady, and people said, "But wouldn't you put Ortiz on there?" And I said, "No, I wouldn't." But that's only my, it's subjective. My producer, who I loved and was with 20 years, said that Ortiz should be on, I'd put him on. I mean, I'm not that intransigent that I don't pay attention to other people, because I'm not that smart. I know what I don't know, which is kind of an important thing in life, I found out. Try to teach that to my kids. My kids, I have to say, my son's a cardiologist in Burlington, Vermont, and obviously pretty proud of him. My youngest daughter is doing stand-up comedy in LA. Please, spare me. You have no idea. I've seen a few of her things. She's pretty funny, but I'm in a few of her routines, so not all that funny. Especially the marriage thing about Susan. But anyway, she's done really well. Then my third daughter, or my second daughter, oldest daughter, she's a free spirit. She lives in the state of Washington. She teaches retarded kids. Not retarded, it's not disadvantaged. I apologize for that. I should know better. My father was a nurse at a state hospital in Ohio, and we lived on the grounds. I really come from pretty basic. Lived in Apple Creek, Ohio. It doesn't get much smaller than that unless you're in Walsastown in Nebraska or whatever, how small that was. So anyway, it was pretty simple. I was pretty lucky and pretty happy to be here. And I don't know what brought you all here today, but you're probably very bored and everything else, and I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, sir.
Bob, well, first of all, thank you for coming.
Oh, please, I had nothing else to do.
Well, it's just one thing to do. But I'm not a sports guy. I didn't particularly ever care much about sports, but I would listen to you, because you would say things that other people thought but wouldn't say out loud. And I imagine it incurred the wrath of your masters at times. I wonder if you might talk a little bit about some of those occasions.
My favorite line of all time is, "Why can't we get players like that?" I hear that all the time, and I know that's going to go on my grave. Why can't we get players like that? But I'm not suggesting that, Dee Dee, so don't get any ideas. I'm not planning to check out just yet. That was my favorite, and I like to use props. I had the panic button, as Patty talked about. One of my favorite, we did what I thought was a great show. This was a regular 6 and 11 o'clock within the context of a 6 o'clock newscast, okay? We had a little longer time at 6. We may have had 7 or 8 minutes at 6 as opposed to 4 at 11. And I thought that night we had it packed with great stuff. We just knew we had great stuff. And then all of a sudden, after it was done, the news director comes running into the studio and says, "Lobel." And I thought he was going to say, "What a great show." He says, "Don't you ever think about combing your hair?" I can't make that up. I said, "Yes, Peter, I will comb my hair." So it's like, yeah, they were pretty good about letting me go as long as I didn't say anything harmful. And I think I was pretty good about not doing that. I was sarcastic, I admit. I think that "why can't we get players like that" was a wise-ass comment that I made when Lou Gorman was the general manager. That's what started it. Lou Gorman was the general manager of the Red Sox. He traded Jeff Bagwell, a Hall of Famer, to Houston for Larry Anderson in a pennant run. And I always said about whenever Bagwell would hit a home run, I said, "Why can't we get players like that?" And it was just, and Lou Gorman says, "Bob, would you please stop saying that?" I said, "I can't, Lou. It's too good. And it just, now you can use it for other teams and all the time. So anyway, it's been kind of stupid to be known for something like that, isn't it? Have a cure cancer or something, or be a librarian, or point kids in the right direction, or be a counselor. I could have been a counselor. I could have meant something to somebody. But I'm throwing out stupid lines about sports. But you know what? One of the best compliments of all is the fact that you said you didn't care about sports and you'd still watch. I'd have to take that to the bank. So I appreciate that a lot.
What was your favorite sport?
Favorite sport? I was really used to be baseball. I'd have to say, the Red Sox used to be on top. The Bruins and Celtics were somewhere in the middle, and the Patriots at the bottom. Then it flipped around. Patriots took over, as you know, through the whole Brady era. The Red Sox, after they won, I've always maintained this, and I talked to Dan Shaughnessy about this. He wrote the book, Curse of the Bambino. That's where that phrase started. The Curse of the Bambino was a book by Dan Shaughnessy. It wasn't anything that was a curse. He made it up. He's the one that made the Curse of the Bambino the Curse of the Bambino, because he wrote a book about it. And I told Dan, I said, the real curse was not the fact that they lost with Buckner, they lost in other games, they lost all those years of desolation and desperation for the Red Sox. The real curse is when they won 4 world championships. That's the curse, because now they got to repeat. And the pressure to repeat that's the curse, much more than the other one. So, okay, I'll go back to your question. Sorry. No, baseball used to be like, for all those reasons, for all those, the 2004 championship and the other ones that came along. By the way, my favorite spin-off job I had was being a public address announcer at Fenway Park. I did that for I did it at least 4 years, because I have 2 World Series rings, thanks to Larry Lucchino, but they gave them to all the employees. So as a public address announcer, we got World Series rings with my name on it in 2004 and 2007. So thank you very much, Larry. I gave him, my son has them. So that was pretty cool. Totally, like I said, it happened to somebody else. What I'd do is get a World Series ring in Boston. I grew up in Ohio in a farm. Cornfield was a next door neighbor. It's just stupid. I mean, that's just it's just stupid. But it was a good stupid. Okay, so Patriots kind of took over. And I say they kind of took over me too. I'm kind of a big, I love the Celtics and they won a championship, but it just some reason doesn't rise to the level of the other teams, of the Patriots and even the Bruins. I think Bruin fans are crazy. They are, but there's more soul and blood and guts in the Bruin fans. I can't explain it. It's more like soul. They're rock solid. They're not going anywhere. I don't know where they come. They come mostly from the North Shore. I know that, and Southie or whatever. But But you know what? Here's another thing. I'll tell you another thing I would have said now that I'm in Cohasset. I haven't heard this on television at all, but I would have called this kid Ben Rice, the guy that plays for the Yankees. I'd have called him the Cohasset Kid. Every night, if he'd have hit a home run on television, absolutely. When I saw that, and he said from Cohasset, automatic Cohasset Kid, it would have been. But nobody's said it yet, so feel free to use it. Yeah, you're right. He is from Cohasset. And I think the town would be proud of him, even though he's playing for the Yankees. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you about those interviews with Williams and all, but you told the stories.
No, that's right. So let's go.
No, I got something better. Maybe controversial, but do you want to share any thoughts about Belichick, your experiences with him, what you think about what's gone down? Just curious.
Great question. Okay, he's a really interesting guy in many words. Not the fact that he's dating a 24-year-old cheerleader. I mean, come on, Bill. But, you know, never mind about that. I think that, I'm not sure what the question is, but you can talk about Belichick, Brady, and Kraft in the same breath in many ways. Let's talk about Brady and Belichick. I think they did it together. It wasn't one, it was both of them. They both were at the peak of their game. I think Belichick, when Brady left, Belichick, for some reason, became a different type of coach. And I don't think he was the same coach, but he didn't have Brady. It's easy to understand why he's not the same coach. You know, and Brady, by winning in Tampa, proved that he was something really special. Great thing about Brady was, I've always wondered, why was he so good? Because he had tempo. He controlled the tempo of the game. He had a great feel for the timing of his plays and tempo, things that you can't really point out or understand, but he just had a way of controlling those things, and it was a God-given talent. And Belichick, listen, their fathers were both coaches. They both came from those kinds of families. They both came from, disciplined, coaching-oriented families. They both knew football. They both were alike. Kraft, on the other hand, is another story. I'm not a big fan. Okay, I don't want to get into it. It's just, I hope his best friends aren't here, but I don't care if they are. I mean, if you are, you must know exactly what I'm talking about. I think he's much more of a taker than a giver. And I think he's done, you got to give him a lot of credit for what he's done. I can remember with him and Myra, his wife, when they were trying to get the stadium, when they were trying to get the team, when they were going against other bidders. He was very sincere, and I talked to Mike Lynch a lot about this. Mike Lynch was on Channel 5. We'd do a podcast together, and we were competitors for like 25 years, and we ended up doing a podcast together, and he's really become a really good friend. We both kind of agree that Kraft's there's not a microphone he didn't like. This is one I don't like. Well, that's because it bit me back earlier. But he just craves that kind of attention. Doesn't make him a bad person. He's done great things and brought, great success and a lot of excitement to a lot of people. So I'll just leave it at that. But that, my assessment of people goes far beyond, I think, their ability to win or lose. I mean, I have my favorite baseball players and my unfavorite baseball players. They're the worst. The hockey players are the best. I'm sure you've heard that before. Hockey players, whether it's their Canadian background or their family background or because of the nature of the sport, you think because it's so tough and hurtful because of all the hitting that goes on that they would be mean, but they're just the opposite off the ice. Most of them are really amazing. Some of the toughest guys, like Terry O'Reilly, are like the greatest guys off the ice, just really genuine. I can't explain why it is that way. Baseball players seem to be coddled and spoiled from very early in their careers. I mean, from Little League on up. They never have to want for anything. So, I've been around too long. I'm too jaded. I used to like it when my father, the first game I ever went to was at the Polo Grounds, which was Patty, you should know, I don't know if you know about Patty Coogan Smith. Her family, there's a place in New York called Coogan's Bluff, and it was formerly a racetrack for trotters, and then they built the Polo Grounds at Coogan's Bluff, which is her family. And that's the first game I ever went to. It's the Polo Grounds. She and I have talked about this many times. My father was a New York Giants fan, which is where they played at the Polo Grounds. So anyway, it was a long history, but she's got big time roots in Major League Baseball, going back into New York. I'm not sure, her grandfather was the first president of the Manhattan. Was it your grandfather?
Borough mayor.
What? Borough mayor.
Borough mayor,
Right,
yeah.
Manhattan.
Boroughs in New York.
Right. Pretty amazing. It's good stock. So now you took out your microphone. And now you can shut off my microphone anytime you want, Patty. Did you know that? You turn it off? You can do that now. Now that you know that, I'm in trouble. Just tell me when it's time to go. You can shut off the microphone. Yes, sir.
You ever keep up with some of the players you covered back in the day?
Yes and no. I was really close to Fisk and then Dwight Evans. Dwight Evans was a pain in the neck on the field as a baseball player. But off the field, he was a totally different guy. You know, he had two sons that had neurofibromatosis, an NF disease that just passed away the last couple of years. Terrible. But Dwight was great. Fisk, I knew Fisk in New Hampshire when I was still doing radio in New Hampshire before I came to Boston. Came to Boston about the same year he did as a rookie. But he did some games with me on the radio, basketball games, high school basketball games. So we were really kind of close for a long time. We actually went to Ireland and Scotland together for a golf trip with 8 other guys. It was pretty cool. I'll never forget it. We were walking back from St. Andrews over that Swillen Bridge. You know the bridge, that famous rock bridge on the 18th? So we came back at night. It was just him and I walking. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have cameras. Obviously, that was a photo opportunity if there ever was one. You know, we just remember we walked back from Glasgow and to the hotel, just shooting the breeze and walking over the Swollen Bridge or whatever. It was just, you know, things. These are the things that I remember. These are the moments that happened to somebody else. What business did I have to be in Glasgow, Scotland with Carlton Fisk? You know, I should have been coaching high school football, doing something for somebody. Anyway, any other guests, sir? No, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
That's hard. What do you remember about Calling All Sports, the radio program?
I know the guy Manello started it and did a great job, and I did it. That's a really cool question. Upton Bell and I were on it for a couple of years, and he and I are still really good friends. I loved doing that show. It was great. It was before television, and that's really where I went to be.
Mid-70s.
Yes. That's good for you. I mean, if you asked me when that year, I couldn't come up with it. So good for you, mid-70s. No, we did it for a couple of years, and that's why I went to Boston to do the radio. I never thought about getting on television. Never thought about television. And so I never went to BZ. I went there for radio. And then one day, Jimmy Myers, who was the weekend sportscaster, walked off the set. He was mad at something and just put the microphone down and walked off. Well, that's a fireable offense. And so now they were looking for a weekend sportscaster. And I didn't know I wanted it. I didn't want it. It was a different world. Television is a different language, all different skills, totally different. I never read a teleprompter. I didn't know how to, too confusing, all that. So I never forget Sayanov, who was our general manager at the time. We were at some kind of cocktail party, and the 3 people auditioned for that job. They had me audition because I was in the house, Brian Leary, who worked at Channel 5, and Judy Carlo, who was at WBCN. Those were the three of us that auditioned for the job. And they hired me because I was easy. I was in the house, they didn't have to, so it was a layup. But I didn't want the job. So Cy said to me, do you want the effing job or don't you? That's basically the way he put it to me. Like I couldn't refuse. I mean, if I didn't, he'd probably get fired. I'd probably get fired from radio. So, yeah, sure, Cy, I'll try it. And that's what happened. And actually, one of the first shows I had, you'll remember this, the Bruins went into the stands in Madison Square Garden and had a fight with the Ranger fans. You remember that? Milbury hitting them with a shoe, and Peter McNabb and Terry O'Reilly, and that was one of the first shows I had done on him. It was a gift. The video was Christmas Eve. I'll never forget. It was Christmas Eve. I know it was Christmas Eve because my birthday's Christmas Eve. So it was the next, things that you remember. So I kept showing that video, and it just caught, it was big. It was amazing. I still love that video. So that's, I guess that doesn't say much about Calling All Sports, which it really was a springboard, actually. But Upton and I are close. We really enjoy doing it together. Now, thanks for asking. Most people don't remember that, like me.
Glad I reminded you.
You did. I'm glad you reminded me, too. Anything else? Yes, sir.
If you were in sports casting or sports entertainment today, where do you think you would fit in? Would you be more doing radio drive time, or be doing, like CSN at night, or a hybrid of it, or what do you think?
That's a
you
great
fit in
question.
today?
I haven't thought about that much, but I have thought about it. Like if I was doing the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news, I would have to do something really different to get people to watch. I mean, but the problem is, if they're not watching to begin with, they're not going to see what you're doing. So, that's been kind of a dilemma. I don't know. I listen to Felger and Mass, and they're kind of incendiary and they're kind of controversial, but I think they're successful. So, I think if you wanted to be successful, you almost have to be outrageous. Unfortunately, I think that's really what it's come down to. And I'm not saying they're outrageous, but they kind of are. They're really over the top in a lot of ways. Apparently, maybe not for younger generation, but I do think they're pretty much over the top. I don't think Upton and I would have been doing that kind of stuff. I mean, we were controversial for us, but that was a long time ago.
Do you think Stephen A. Smith is like that too?
Yes, that's very good. Of course Stephen A's like that. They don't have shtick, They can't be like that really in person, because how could they live on the planet? Who would want to be associated with them? No, absolutely. That's a perfect example. Yeah, and in television, it's like, I think you really have to be outrageous. I don't know what it is. You can't just talk outrageous like you can on the radio. You got to show it. Yeah, you got to really connect with people. So I'm not connecting anymore. Not much with a golf ball anyway. But Patty's been great to play with. She's unbelievable. Ever see her play golf? Big time. She can play. Anyway, I'm giving her way too much credit. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How do you fill your days now that you're retired?
How do I feel? Say what?
How do you spend your time?
Oh, how do I spend my time?
Yeah, now that you're out of the sports.
I sleep a lot. I spend time playing golf. I mean, I have this. Oh, I should talk about this stupid wheelchair. I don't, I hate it. It's just the way it is. I can't, you know, it was a thing called, I'll tell you, I won't forget you. Believe me, because I spend my time in this wheelchair. And I transfer into a golf cart called a paragolfer. So I have to transfer into the golf cart, which enables me to play golf. It kind of lifts me up. And so I had this, like 4 years ago, got this virus. Dee Dee and I were in Florida. And one day I woke up, I just couldn't walk. And, you know, went to the Naples hospital and ended up flew to Boston. It's a long story. But the fact is, it was a virus called transverse myelitis. No one knows how you get it. It's pretty rare, and that's that. You know, there's no cure. Some people come back from it. Most people don't. I haven't. So that's why I'm in this wheelchair. Sometimes I should have said that at the beginning, because I would at least explain. People say, "Why is he sitting in a wheelchair? Was it an accident?" You know, it's a legitimate question. So that's just what that was. It's not like, I mean, that's why Dee Dee's been a huge help for many reasons, but this has been a main one. And it was just one of those things. So I spent a lot of time not thinking about it, just doing it. I know what I have to do. I know what I'm limited in doing. I enjoy playing golf because it gets me out of the house. I do spend a lot of time watching stupid news channels and television, you know, and by the way, I don't think the Patriots are going to win more than 4 games this year, but I'm just saying, I just drift off into that sometimes. But that's kind of, you know, I do a podcast with Lynch, and in fact, I just talked to Lenny Clark. You know Lenny Clark this morning, the comedian? I just talked to him before I came here because we're going to have him on next week. I'm not saying that to promote it, I'm just saying that that's kind of what my life is like. It's somebody else. I'm just here going through the motions.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for caring, yes.
You mentioned the Bagwell trade as far as the Red Sox went. As far as the other franchises in town, what would you classify as the worst trades or releases of the year?
I think letting Brady go is pretty hard not to do that. It's hard to characterize hockey and baseball. Oh, I can tell you exactly. Let's put Brady and Mookie Betts in the same category. Mookie Betts, who now plays for the Dodgers, might end up being one of the greatest baseball players in the history of the game. And the Red Sox let him go. For what? Money. Yeah, right. I think that's one of those why can't we get players. Like, that's an automatic. And then Chris Sale's no prize. Chris Sale may win the National League Cy Young Award. I mean, but Mookie Betts is thanks for, good question.
How about the Orr departure?
Well, that was pretty bad, you're right. That's as good as any. Or was sold to the Chicago Blackhawks because his agent, Alan Eagleson, who went to jail, thought it was a good deal and kept the information that Orr was going to be a limited owner of the franchise if he'd stayed here in Boston. And the agent was friendly with Wirtz, who was the owner of the Blackhawks, and made the deal with Wirtz for Orr. And he never told Orr about the Boston offer. Orr found out about that like a year later from, I guess, Harry Sinden or something, and then fired the agent. And it was you're right, that's a really good one. I mean, yeah, Mookie Betts or Brady, yeah, those are some pretty good departures. Yes, sir.
You talked about Bill Russell, some issues that he had, and I think Liz Walker kind of changed things with the audience for evening news. The guy who I think changed things in terms of the player personnel in the city was Pedro Martinez.
Yeah, that's really good. He was a personality for sure. It's hard to, certainly one of the greatest pitchers they have. You know, this is who brought him here. And one of the Pedro Martinez things is Dan Duquette. He's brought Wakefield here, he brought Pedro Martinez here, he brought Ortiz here. He brought a lot of those guys here, and he never got a World Series ring out of it. And why do I get 2 World Series rings and Duquette doesn't have one? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. I'm really upset with her. You say I don't get upset about things, but I'm upset about that now that you did it. I'm pissed at the Red Sox for not doing that. I can go to my unhappy place real fast sometimes. Right? That's a real injustice as far as I'm concerned. But you know what? It's their money, it's their decisions, and I still think Dan deserved a ring and the recognition because I think he did a great job. Yes, sir.
You were a buddy of Fisk, so
Yeah.
what can you tell us about the failure to give him the contract on time?
You asked Haywood Sullivan. I don't know whether it was Gene Yawkey or I think that there was between, he wasn't the only one. Fred Lynn, Fisk, and Burleson, I think, were the 3 at the time. Remember, that was a big, there's another one of those Mookie, stupid trade things. Right. The fact that they didn't get the contract on time allowed him to become a free agent.
Right.
And he was, I think, so upset with the Red Sox. I mean, a New Englander. I mean, what more could you ask? All-star catcher. Hall of Famer, as it turned out. He was upset, and there was no way he was coming back. And
Did they try to get him back?
I don't think they tried real hard. You talking about money before, it was just money then, too. I mean, I'm not saying Tom Yawkey was any great owner either, or Gene, or whatever, she was involved. It was Gene Haywood and Buddy LaRue at the time. Scary. Yes, hi.
How do you think the NIL and the trade,
I think a college coach has got to be crazy to be a college coach. I think it's really hard. It's not, the NIL's name, image, and likeness. It's what college football players basically allows, or not only football, athletes, allows them to get paid and a lot of money. So many of these coaches, like Calipari and all these guys, have moved on to other situations because they can't deal with it. I mean, I think being a college coach is so much more difficult now than any other level because of all that. Not only the NIL, but also with the portal. If you want to get in, right, there's no transfer portal for television. If I want to get in a transfer portal, to go to Chicago or to go to New York or anything, it doesn't exist. But if I was an athlete, sure, could do that. Every year, and they do. I'm not saying they should take advantage of it. If your family, your son or daughter is playing at a high level at Pittsburgh State and wants to move on to BC, all she has to do is put her name in the transfer portal. And BC can decide to pick her up, bring her over, give her a solid scholarship, blah, blah, blah. Why wouldn't she?
makes it hard for a coach to...
Impossible. I think yes, it does. Extremely difficult. Not only to keep players, but to get players. By the time you get around to coaching, you don't have any time left.
Plus, if you're not in a big school like Alabama with crazy donors, you don't have the money to pay these for the NIL.
Right. No, it's true. Now that you bring that up, it makes me glad I didn't get into coaching after all. Because I think the natural progression is once you're a high school coach, maybe you want to get into it and be a college coach. And then once you're a college coach and successful, maybe you want to get into it and be a pro coach. You're always kind of looking for the next opportunity, whether it comes or not. But listen, I tell you that I'm just really grateful I had what I had. And it was a wonderful career. I wish I'd have paid closer attention to the times. You know, things flashed through my brain like where I was in 2004 during the World Series, where I was in 2007 in Colorado, and just things, you know, Celtic championships, going, you know, being out in LA, and just stuff, you know, talking to Jack Nicholson, doing, but it was like somebody else. Again, I can't, you know, I'm name dropping.
Can you talk a little bit about where you were in, let's say, 1986?
In 1986, what a great question. I absolutely can tell you where I was, and I think you're talking about Shea Stadium in New York when Bill Buckner let the ball go through his legs. I can absolutely tell you about that night. Okay. 19 days. And I know it's 19 because we counted. A fellow sportscaster on our staff, Don Shane was his name. He has since moved on back to Detroit, where he grew up and has passed away, sadly. 19 days before that game of Buckner, he interviewed Bill Buckner. And Shane asked him, what's the worst thing that could happen? I swear to God, I got the tape. Oh, I don't know where, I don't have it. I know where it is. I've seen it 100 times. What's the worst thing that could happen to a player in a World Series? Answer, ball going through your legs to lose a game. How about that? 19 days before. I tear up thinking about that. I get chills thinking about that. And Buckner was a really good guy. I have a before and after story to this. Night of all the press about the 7th inning is brought down to the locker rooms so they get ready for their post-game interviews in those World Series games. It was the same in the football game. It's the same in Vinatieri. It's another one I'll tell you about. Okay, shut up, Bob. We're almost at that time. Just hurry up anyway. We go downstairs in front of the Red Sox locker room. In the locker room, and the Red Sox were leading in the game, you know, 6th game. The polyurethane was up in the lockers, covering the lockers and the players' clothes from the champagne celebration so they don't get wet. They brought the champagne in, they brought the trophy in, and at some point, they brought Mrs. Yockey in with Haywood Sullivan. He walked her in. So they're in the locker room, and we're standing outside. And what happened. We could not see it because it was on a transistor. Turned out to be somebody had a transistor radio because there was no television down there in the bowels of Shea Stadium at that time. So we could hear, you know, ball, little dribbler up the first baseline, goes through the legs, blah, 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 blah. We know the rest. So what happened was the game was on our air. It was on, we happened to be NBC at the time. The game was on our air, and I had to come back on in front of the locker room. And I said, I know exactly what I said. I said, they're not coming out, and I'm not going in. That's exactly what I said. I know that, you know, in 30 seconds, the polyurethane was gone, the trophy was gone, champagne was gone. I don't know what happened to Mrs. Yockey, because she was, that's what happened. That was the bucket. And then another thing, after that, we all went into town. It was Jack Williams, because it was, you know, the World Series, and they had all the anchors down there and everything, you know. Jack Williams, we went into Boston to the Hard Rock Cafe. I was in New York in the Hard Rock Cafe. And we were sitting at the bar, and remember the Daryl chant, Daryl, Daryl? It was a big chant about Daryl Strawberry. And we did that. We sat at the bar, and I started chanting Daryl, Daryl, like a stupid boy. I was young. younger. And the bartender said, don't do that anymore. Because if you do that anymore, I'm going to throw you out. No problem. 10 minutes later, there's no bartender. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. Daryl, he's down filling a keg of beer underneath the bar. So he comes out. You're kicked out. Jack Williams had a glass of bourbon or something. He took it up and turned it over on the bar. I'm just saying, it was a scene. We were stupid, but it was a scene. That's what happened after that. And the other thing I'll say, the last was in the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl in 2002. It turned out to be after 9/11 in New Orleans. We were all down below, same deal, but there was a television on, except it was a 10-second delay. And we knew that Vinatieri was going to kick a field goal, or try to kick a field goal. So we're all down below, and none of us can see it. I mean, here's the stupid, we're covering the damn game. Reporters are covering the game, and none of us get to see the ending. And it's just the way, how stupid it was. Vinatieri kicks, and you could hear the crowd through the doors yell, but you didn't know if they're yelling because he made it or because he missed it. And the TV didn't help because they were on like a 10-second, 15-second delay. Anyway, that was our other major experience. It's just kind of, I'm funny you should ask that, but I'm glad you did. Because they're like, I should have told those stories. I should write these things down.
Those are kind of sports landmarks.
Yes, they were sports landmarks. I mean,
We all remember them.
Yes, you're right. We all know where we were at the time. I wish you were where I was at the time. And I was with you, but yeah.
I was in Shea Stadium for 36.
You were?
Yes.
Amazing. So you saw it. I did. How was it?
I was the guest of the attorney for the New York Mets. We were in a box seat right behind the Mets dugout. When there were 2 outs in the 9th inning, some guy behind me says, who made, the great trivia question is going to be, who made the final out of the World Series? And it's going to be Gary Carter. Carter singled, and you know the rest. When Ray Knight scored, and they all went crazy, I was shell-shocked, because 30 seconds before I said, I'm going to be the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I'm going to be here when the Red Sox break the curse. And I was shocked. So I just stood there for about an hour. Nobody left the stadium. After an hour, the Mets players came out in various stages of undress and ran around the field, revving up the crowd.
Wow.
Well, I was supposed to go home on the Eastern Shuttle that night. I was going to take a cab from Shea Stadium to LaGuardia, but I didn't care, so I walked along the Grand Central Parkway.
Yeah, my God.
Walked there and got into the terminal, and they had 2 flights on for the Boston people. And everyone was laying on the terminal floor, silent. The trip back, silent. So I crawl into bed at about 6:30 in the morning. My wife rolls over and says, I know they lost. I'm so sorry. And I said, do not ever speak of this again.
First of all, I wish you'd have come to the Hard Rock Cafe. And I could have gone home. That's a great story. It's better than mine, actually.
True stories are always best.
Well, that's, going and seeing them run around the field. I mean, we had no clue, right? Yeah. Networks had signed off and blah, blah, blah. Amazing.
Well, you were out drinking.
What was that? Yeah, well, what, Patty? Okay, you got it. She's running the show. You could have gone over to Coogan's Bluff and packed in for the... Yes?
What was the toughest interview you ever did? Whether it's just cantankerous exchange or status interview, whatever the background might be?
Well, that's so many good questions. I think Jim Rice probably was the toughest. I've talked to the back of his head many times. I mean, I just think Nomar was no prize. I can tell you that. But Jim, I think that M.L. Carr was the best. I'm trying to think. I'd have to say Rice. I haven't had too many confrontational. Oh, I can tell you one, absolutely. This is part of the Buckner story. Because before the game, before the series, the Mets, before we went to Shea Stadium, they played the Angels. And Donnie Moore, Gerald Henderson, who hit a home run in that. He could have hit the two most important home runs in Red Sox history.
That was the A's.
86. Right, it was that. So it was. We were doing stand-up interviews, and I'll be quick, Patty. I keep saying that. We were doing stand-up interviews, and players we'd line up players ahead of time. Would you come over and talk to us? And Don Shane and Alan Miller was my producer. I said, I'm tired of asking these same questions to these guys. You got anything different to ask? And Shane, who was like the weekend sportscaster at the time, says, why don't you ask him why the Red Sox big bats like Buckner and Evans are not hitting, and guys like Marty Barrett are hitting 450 or whatever. Remember, Barrett was on a tear. And I said, yeah, that's pretty good. Well, it turned out it wasn't that good, because Buckner walked off. He said, I'm on live TV in 6 o'clock news from Fenway Park during a playoff game with the Angels. Buckner says, why would you ask a question like that? And he says, you mean you made me come all the way out of here from batting practice? And he walked off. Now that's a tough interview. Then Liz Walker, of course, said, Bob, I see you're getting along the players really well. But then Buckner and I made up before the Shea Stadium, before the World Series started. We were in Shea. I think they were ahead 2-0 going down to Shea Stadium. I don't remember. I think Hurst and I don't know. It doesn't matter. But we made up and we apologized to each other. I said that was a stupid question. He said, well, I shouldn't have reacted like. So we became close. And when he came back to Fenway Park, remember it was opening day. I happened to be sitting right behind him, and Evans brought him over to say hi, and I just said, thanks for coming back. And it was just, so we'd all made up and everything else, but that was the other part of the Buckner story. That it all goes back to, some thread of what happens. I'll go back to Rice. Rice was tough. He just wasn't user-friendly at all, but Nomar was such a jerk. He put a line of tape in front of his locker, told the media they could not cross it. Don't get me started. He really was probably the worst. All right, shut up, Bob. Hey, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.